Welcome to Roundtable Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about. We talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
How you doing?
Good. Back at it again.
Back at it. Glad at it. Glad at it.
Glad at it? I like that. That's cool. I'll tell you, I did, in fact, call last week's episode The First Breakfast.
Oh, great.
It made me smile. It made me happy.
Good. Make it memorable.
This week's reading is from John. And I was just asking you because I feel like this whole process has made me think about John in a way I hadn't. I hadn't thought of it as sort of this almost outlier of the four Gospels. And so I asked you if it was intentional we were reading so much John, and you said...
More or less.
More.
I was more definitive but yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's it's a unique voice. And it's not that Matthew and Mark and Luke are not easily identified in some ways for their styles, but they do have a lot of material that they share. And John has, I think, a really distinctive voice. I will say that when I was in seminary a few years ago, at Union Theological Seminary, there was a faculty member on staff who was known as the John Scholar of the World. Yeah, Father Raymond Brown. And he was a tremendous person and scholar. And so when he used to deliver messages during the chapel services, he always chose material from John, I think, to underscore the fact that this is sometimes a voice we don't hear as much as the other three Gospels.
Yeah.
And so I've come to appreciate it, and I'm very challenged by it, and so we tried to include some extra material from John.
I like that. I like that you're, as they say, leaning in to the challenge and embracing it. So our reading this week is from John chapter 10, verses 11 through 18. So let's dive in. Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. And the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice. And there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father." I did not notice it was KJV before I started.
Beautifully read. King James Version is a stretch, and you did a beautiful job.
I had to slow it down.
That's the way to do it. Yes, indeed.
Is hireling the right word?
Yes.
Is that how one pronounces that?
Yep. Someone entrusted with the care of the sheep while the shepherd is away.
A hired hand, they might have called them.
Yeah, exactly.
As a thing. Okay. So we sort of hear the I am the shepherd and these are my sheep. We hear this sort of shepherd, lamb imagery a lot. So what about this connects with you?
So one of the reasons it's interesting to choose this text, and I don't honestly know if I did this deliberately, but it turned out.
Hey.
So
I'll give you credit for it either way.
Thank you. So traditionally in the Christian church, the second Sunday in May is often called Good Shepherd Sunday.
Hey, look at you go.
And so it actually happens to coincide with Mother's Day this year. So there's a little interesting conjunction. We have these two holidays. One, started from secular origins, and one has been going on for a while within the tradition of the church. So it is a day to elevate this particular text of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, which is a model of someone who really cares for the community, cares so much for the community, in fact, that he says he's willing to lay down his life for it. So that's great leadership. That is great, great leadership. And I just want to point out two things about this. There's a lot of things to talk about in this, but here's a little Greek. I'm going to throw some Greek in here. Yes. There is a Greek phrase, two-word phrase. It's ego, eimi. So those words mean ego is I, the Greek word for I, the pronoun, and eimi means I am. So these passages that begin, there are several of them in John which begin with I am. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. And again, there's several of them. And they are known as the ego eimi statements. And he's constantly affirming his identity. So he's giving us clues about what matters to him. So it's one thing to say, I'm the light of the world. I am the bread of the world. I am the good shepherd. We get all these different images, right, which are very, very rich, and they fill out this amazing picture of who he is. So this is one of those statements, which is a good thing to know. And then there's another interesting part of this at the end. He says, other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. And my question is, who are they?
Yeah.
Because you think up to this point, he's really talking about the community of Christian people. You know, they might not have been called that at the time this gospel was written, but who's he talking about there? Right? I mean, it's not as if it's his specific audience of disciples. It's as if he has a broader vision. And so this text has sometimes been used in interreligious or interfaith settings to suggest that there is a universality about what Jesus is doing. And it transcends the, let's say, the more narrow focus on his followers, which I think is intriguing, right? We're not exactly entirely sure what this might be. And I guess the last thing I would say is the very last paragraph is interesting because when he says, no man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself, I have power to lay it down and I have power to take it again. You know, here's a person who is basically looking out at the world, which is a Roman Empire world, and saying, you don't have any power over me. Yes, you can, threaten my life, but you only do that because I'm putting myself in a position that enables you to do that.
I'm letting you, basically.
That's right. I have the power here. And he indicates that power really comes from God. So it's interesting because when people start to stand up like that in response to an imperial governance, it's designed to take the power away. And it's catchy, like it's infectious. And other people are thinking, well, if he said that, maybe that's true for me too. So, do we all have that power? I take it up. I have the power to take it up. I have the power to put it down. I love this passage, by the way. And, it's very assertive, even though it recognizes the vulnerability. To me, so these are just a few kind of surface impressions of this text.
I love that because, people talk about, people who stand in their power. And you can see that when people really embody so much of what lights them up and what gives them motivation and purpose and drive and all those things. You can feel it. And it's almost, to me, it's almost like they kind of lightly glow a little bit. Like people just have this essence when they're just so aligned with the life that they are intending for themselves, that is often usually with a purpose in mind. I feel like is a big element of that. I do have to, can I tell him about the conversation we had last week a little bit? So he doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's fine. So last week,
go for it.
I noted that last Sunday, which was now 2 days ago, was May the 4th.
Yes.
He knows what I'm talking about now. And May the 4th is sometimes known as Star Wars Sunday. And so I thought, wouldn't it be humorous to play a little Star Wars on the organ, right? I thought that would be a funny, fun thing. That's as much as I thought about it. That's literally surface level. Oh, I'll do that. And then I went to find some sheet music because I was like, not gonna, so I could adapt for the organ because that doesn't really exist. But I found a piano piece for it. And so I found the main theme kind of a thing. And then I found the Imperial March, which I have long held that I get cranky that always the villain in all these movies and films and even the Grinch played the pipe organ. But I thought it'd be funny to lean into it. So you and I were talking about this and I was like, I might play the main theme. I might play the Imperial March just because it's ha 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 funny evil organist. Ha 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 ha. Can you tell them what you said?
Well, I thought, I think given the whole notion of who we are, right, and force for good and where we're standing and positioning ourselves in the world, let's bring the force out here.
Yeah.
The positive force.
The good side.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, well, if you're going to make me think deeply about it, fine.
Right. Yeah.
So I did do it. I played the main theme from the Star Wars.
And it was brilliant. It was brilliant. I thought it was great. And actually, it was wonderful to see people's reactions to it.
So my back is to them. Were they with it?
And I think that, for a lot of people since those movies came out who don't have and have not had a connection to a religious community, maybe of any sort,
right,
the Force gave them a way to talk about a feeling, or a spirituality that maybe they couldn't get from anything or anyone else. And so I think that to kind of elevate that a little bit, because there are scholars who call the Holy Spirit the energy of life, the force of life. And here's this whole phrase, the force. And I think it's a little bit of what's going on even in this story, right? There's a power there. And it's not named specifically, but it's just acknowledged. And it's the power that connects Jesus with God. It's the power that he wants to pass along to his disciples. And there it is.
I love it. I have to say, you just made a connection that I think makes it all make sense to me now, which is we have our force for good. This one day you're not wearing your
I know,
hoodie,
can you believe it?
Is the force for good. And I've always felt like force is weird because I'm like, I've struggled with that.
Yes.
And we've talked about this before
Yes.
in the podcast. We've talked about this multiple times.
Yeah.
But I never thought about it in like the force way. And now I'm all in now.
Now you're on board.
I'm all in now.
All right. I am glad.
I think it's great.
You're a convert.
Like, now I'm ready to go. So I think that's really interesting, that idea of like the power and like owning that power, and then the way that Jesus is basically like, I'm putting myself in a position that's going to let you do this, but let's not kid ourselves. I'm in control here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. It's reminding me of an event, sad event, but we've sometimes mentioned the name Dietrich Bonhoeffer on these podcasts. So he was a German theologian, a pastor. He actually studied at Union Theological Seminary in New York City in 1929, I think. But during the Second World War, he became involved in the active resistance movement. And he tried to, he kind of served as a go-between between Germans and people from the English church who were communicating back and forth about the resistance and trying to communicate to the Allies that there is resistance, and they wanted to be as helpful to that as they could be. He was arrested because of that. He was sent to prison. He spent a lot of time there, wrote a book while he was there, or a collection of letters. He was executed on April the 9th, 1945. And on the way to his death, there was a chaplain there. And he looked at the chaplain and said, I think the words that he mentioned were something like, I go to die, I go to receive eternal life. So acknowledging the vulnerability, and yet acknowledging that there's a power that transcends this moment. And in fact, the chaplain said later, of all the people that he had worked with over the lives, he'd never seen anyone so composed in the face of death as Bonhoeffer was. And so I think about the same thing here, this extraordinary composure. And also what comes through here, there's an intimacy here, because he will say, I know all of my sheep by name, and they know me, they know my name. And there's that, of course, important element of life in all cultures, that when you give your name into the keeping of someone else, you're kind of giving an important part of yourself. You're giving access. Right. And so there's this very deep sense of caregiving. And I think the church over the centuries has one of the features of being part of a church is its pastoral care. The care that it provides for its members as they make their way through all of the changes and challenges and transitions of life, but to be present to people when they are going through all of those moments. That's what's being elevated here. And Jesus essentially develops the model for that. he does more than that, but he certainly offers that kind of care, which is beautifully expressed in this passage.
You mentioned at the beginning of our chat that it was interesting that it falls on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
What do you think the tie-in there is?
I've been actually thinking about that in preparation for Sunday, because, the origins of Mother's Day actually the roots are back in the 19th century. And it was started as a peace movement. And it grew out of the pain that mothers experienced as a result of losing family members during the Civil War. So the movement in its early decades was really about creating a world where mothers didn't have to mourn anymore. Wow. And it wasn't until the early part of the 20th century that it became the kind of more public holiday and commercialized in the way that it has been over the years. But those who were first part of the Mother's Day movement, who actually tried to distance themselves from that commercialization process, they were trying to say, let's women, moms around the world, mothers around the world, let's be united. And let's demand of the leaders around the world that they seek peace, because it's going to save millions and millions of lives. And that's really how it started. So I think there's a connection there, right? Yeah. It's the Good Shepherd. And I think here mothers were expressing concern, not just for their sons and the sons of others in their own countries, but also for the sons of mothers from other countries around the world, right? To say this is something we all care about. This is all something that we share in. And I think the initial history there has been lost over the years. And so I think that's always something that's good to try to reclaim, at this time. And this having the fact that these two events, these two, days are in conversation with each other this year.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. I don't know that I'd ever understood the history of it so viscerally. And I think, what's interesting is actually because I have a toddler, I follow Miss Rachel on Instagram.
Yep.
Miss Rachel, the children's media creator, who's fabulous. And so she does she started out doing YouTube videos all about helping kids with speech development issues and helping them with that. And she does songs. And if you watch any child watch Miss Rachel, they're just like, I mean, they are the heart eye emojis. I mean, they really just can't get enough of her. And I don't blame them. She's magic.
Yep.
And so I follow her on Instagram, like you do. And she has actually been very outspoken about the conflict happening in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And she has been very, very specific that she is advocating for children. Mm-hmm. That as a mom, talking to fellow moms, that children should not be in conflict in this way. And that, why does her son deserve a better life than this person's son? And I think that is such a beautiful and important image to think about. At the end of the day, we're all somebody's child, and that finding that no one, that violence doesn't need to be as prevalent, and that, my love for my child is no stronger and no more worthy than someone's, air quote, over there.
It's keeping the focus on the most vulnerable people in the planet, right? And I think I would connect that text with something, Jesus says. He was adamant about putting children at the center of life. Children in his day also being the most vulnerable, most expendable people in the empire, right? Of what value were children to the Roman Empire unless they could be used for some kind of work project, right? And so I think that his good shepherdness, manifests itself in so many different ways, especially when you think about his the way in which he elevated the role of children. Unless you become as a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. So if you think about wherever children in the world are in danger, you get the sense that the human enterprise is in danger, not only from a physical standpoint, from a moral standpoint. And so being a good shepherd it's a big role, right? It's a universal role. And there's actually another text we're going to talk about later on in the year, which is from one of the prophets. It's from Ezekiel. And he also uses the imagery of the good shepherd as the image for the ruler. So, and that was common, especially in the centuries before Jesus, the king was seen as the shepherd of the people. So it goes back a long, long way. And this is, I think, what we want to recapture, right, for our own time. And churches, when they're at their best, communities of faith, when they're at their best, they're good shepherds, not only for their own congregations, but for the communities in which they live. And I think that's kind of what Jesus is getting at here when he says there are others who are not of my fold. And this would be just a great question to bring out into the community. So who's he talking about? We could ask that. We could all ask that of our neighbors, of our communities, of our regions. Who's being left behind? Who's being left out? And then ask the question, how do we respond to that?
I love that. And I feel like as part of our 52 for the Journey, we've also been exploring this question of who is my neighbor and how do I love them better? I feel like if there was a subtitle to 52, that would be mine. I would actually love to know, our dear listeners, so far in this journey, we're about halfway through actually. Is there been something that you have connected with or found to be a through thread or something that just stuck with you? Because for me, it's that.
I'd love to hear that.
We would love to hear that. Drop us a line, leave a comment. Oh my goodness, that would be the best day ever to hear that from you guys. So
yes,
let us
indeed.
know. And I think we'll leave it there for the day.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.